Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another review video here on the channel. We are continuing with my mission to keep reviewing the new releases I am reading, and today we are talking about Chana Porter's newest book, The Thick and the Lean. Some quick disclaimers before we start. I was sent a free digital review copy of this book by the publisher. Regardless of where books come from, nobody's paying me to talk about books except my patrons, and all opinions are my own. I will keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible while still talking about the book as a whole. If you do want to go into this knowing absolutely nothing, pause the video, come back when you've read it, we'll talk then. And lastly, I will link the story graph for the book below in case you want to check out any user-generated content warnings, but I will say right here at the off that a large portion of this book concerns eating and disordered eating in particular, being restrictive about your eating. That's a hugely sensitive topic, and this video we are going to be talking about that, so if you need to miss this one, keep yourself safe. Do what's best for you. This is a sci-fi dystopian novel that came out in the US much earlier. I am reviewing the UK edition, which comes out on the 22nd of August, which I think will have passed by the time this video goes up, so you should be able to order a copy now if you would like one. Chana Porter is an American playwright, author, and education activist. They have also written The Seep, which I reviewed earlier this year, which is a similarly weird sci-fi dystopian kind of story. I'm going to read you the blurb of the book as written because I think there is no way I will be able to summarize this novel otherwise. So, in the quaint religious town of Seagate, abstaining from food brings one closer to God. But Beatrice Bolano is hungry. She craves the forbidden: butter, flambé, marzipan. As Seagate takes increasingly extreme measures to regulate every calorie its citizens consume, Beatrice must make a choice: give up her secret passion for cooking, or leave the only community she has known. Elsewhere, Reiko Romando has left her modest roots for a college tech scholarship in the big city. A flawless student, she is set up for success until her school pulls her funding, leaving her to face either a mountain of debt or a humiliating return home. But Reiko is done being at the mercy of the system. She forges a third path, outside the law. With the guidance of a mysterious cookbook written by a kitchen maid centuries ago, Beatrice and Reiko each grasp for a life of freedom, something more easily imagined than achieved in a world dominated by catastrophic corporate greed. A startling fable of the entwined perils of capitalism, body politics, and the stigmas women face for appetites of every kind, Chana Porter's profound new novel explores the reclamation of pleasure as a revolutionary act. There is no way I would be able to succinctly summarise that. We have a dual point of view novel following two characters in a world where capitalism really has popped off. The core theme of this book is that exploration of pleasure, but particularly pleasure through food. It's interesting, other forms of pleasure are present in the book, and it almost works to increase that theme because the taboo is not those things, the taboo is actually food. It's a very strong central theme. It's a very difficult central theme. I'm not saying that I didn't struggle with reading portions of this book because they really did hit very close to home. But overall, that idea of the exploration of pleasure as a revolutionary act, hugely powerful and definitely pulled off throughout this book. One of the things that struck me about The Seep, Chana Porter's earlier book, is that it's a very weird book, intentionally so. It's written to be very unsettling and strange, and The Thick and the Lean is similar in a lot of ways. It's definitely a book designed to make you feel a little bit off. I would say it's less weird in a lot of ways in The Seep because we're not dealing with alien parasites in quite the same way, but it's definitely got that same flavour of deliberately setting you on edge for the entirety of the book. It is a story that is meant to make you uncomfortable. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed these two characters. They're very different, and it's a very interesting way of seeing this world. These two characters in the journey they go on are very separate. They don't come together for the majority of the book. It's not a case of having that kind of classic YA novel of a chapter of each of them and then they meet and everything goes on from there. It's got that dystopian flavour of these are characters that are letting you see a window on the world. These are two stories of many. These just happen to be the ones you're being told. While these characters are not always making good choices, they are always hugely emotive and interesting, and I just found them wonderful to read. Beatrice was my favourite of the two, if I had to have one, but I think Reiko's story hit home more in terms of exploring, sometimes taking the easy path, even though it might not be the right one. Once again, Chana Porter creates a really unsettling vision of the future, a future that we don't necessarily want, though in a lot of ways you can see how we would absolutely get there, and at its core, the moment you start to analyse it, a world that's not super different from our own. It feels weird, it feels unsettling, but the values are very similar to what we have now. It almost adds a kind of existential horror element to the whole book, because you just feel a bit like, how do I stop this from happening, because I can see how we're gonna be there soon. I think primarily a lot of that's rooted in diet culture and the exploration of that in the book, but that's not all that the book is exploring. It's much more about capitalism, and the food, while it is a core theme and definitely has a lot of applications to our attitudes toward food today, it's much more metaphorical than that. Reading this, you can tell Hannah Porter is a playwright. It almost feels poetic. A lot of it's very dialogue focused. I felt the playwright energy coming through in this story. Things to bear in mind if you're planning on reading this. The big one is obviously to keep those content warnings in mind. This is not a book for everyone. It includes a content warning at the start of the book. I would highly recommend taking it at your own pace, seeing what you're comfortable with. I can see this being a book that would not work for a lot of people. If you are still planning on reading it though, here are some things to bear in mind. I think it is a book that you just have to fully surrender to. It is not going to gently ease you into this world. It is not going to take its time introducing the rules and the values and the various players. You just need to go in and assume that you will figure out what's important as you go. I think that will mean that it's going to be a very different book on a reread, which I'm looking forward to at some point in the future. However, that was also true of The Seep, and every single time I've reread The Seep, I felt a real growth of my, not necessarily love for that book. I don't think I love that book, but my affection towards it has grown. I think it's a really interesting story. I'm not a person who usually enjoys very literary fiction, and I think this edges up against that. It's sort of tiptoeing on that knife edge between being a speculative fiction book and being literary, and probably actually sits in both camps. I find often I get very bogged down in literary fiction, and I think if I was reading a lot of it at the moment, this book would have been just another book of that kind. But because I haven't read things of a similar tone lately, it felt fresh to me. Some comparisons, some other things you might want to read. I've mentioned The Seep a lot in this video, I think because when I was reading this, that was what I was comparing it to the whole time. I don't know how it would feel reading it having not read Hannah Porter's other work. But if you haven't read The Seep, it's a really interesting, again, story about a dystopian-ish future, exploring kind of what a utopia looks like and what the problems with that are. I do have a review video up for that you can go and check out if you fancy. The other thing I wondered about reading was Autonomous by Annalee Newitz. Honestly, anything by Annalee Newitz, but that's my particular one. Again, looking at the future and looking at dystopia and exposing some things about the current world through looking at a potential future. Should you read The Thick and the Lean? It's not going to be a book for everyone, and for the people that it is a book for, I think you need to pick the right time and place. I can definitely see past me having read this book and had a really tough time with it. I was in the right place at the right time for this one. However, I do think that it is a beautifully crafted novel. I really like the way that Hannah Porter writes. I like the world that she creates. I think it's a really poignant book. It would make a great book club book if you knew you had a book club that it wasn't going to be a problem to read it. Overall, it's a yes, but for very specific people. Have you read this? Have you read anything else by Hannah Porter? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also come hang out on Discord, where we have chill chats about books. I would like to say an enormous thank you to all the ghosts who haunt me over on Patreon. They support the channel and in return get early access to videos, bonus content, live streams, and more. If you'd like to join their number, that's linked below as well. Thank you so much to you for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one.